So welcome everybody. Thanks for coming to this class today. I'm going to present to you developing incidents and roles incident command system. It's going to give us an opportunity to kind of have a better understanding of the incident command system and how we fit into it in EMS, and the fact that maybe whether you believe or realize it or not, we're part of this system. So some of the functions of command include establish and announce command and assume an effective operating position or command post. So it doesn't initially, like if you're the first unit on scene, have to be like this fancy place where you set up command. It may just be alongside your ambulance where you're standing there with a radio. That's your command post. But it is a place where people need to know where to report to and need to know where the leader is at. So having an established command post saying basically where you're at is a good idea. And then you also have to rapidly evaluate the situation. You have to do initially what's called a scene size up, and you identify any safety risks, any additional resources that you may need, where the incident at, and then what your kind of overall strategy is. And then you're constantly sizing up the incident. So you're always communicating and reevaluating the incident and whether you need more resources or less resources, or if there's any change in tactics or strategies. So initiate and maintain control of the communications process. So a lot of people, when we've given this class, they immediately throw up their hands, and I'll just kind of debunk it right out of the gate. So they throw up their hands and say, well, we can't do this because we don't have the same radios that the law enforcement people have, or we don't have the same radio that fire has, so how can we participate in this? Well, you're not really understanding the real reason we even have an incident command system, because the whole purpose of having an incident command system is that it enables us to communicate and overcome those barriers. So as we get into this more and we start talking about the concepts of unified command and those things, this system is designed to overcome those barriers. It's designed for that specific reason, because we know that you're not always going to be able to talk to everybody. Identify the overall strategy, develop an incident action plan, and assign companies and personnel consistent with the plans and standard operating procedure. Develop an effective incident management organization. So your organization has to grow with your incident. So it has to be appropriate to the size of your incident. And we're going to get into how those incident structures develop as the incident grows. Additional resources shall be ordered, requested by the incident commander only. So yeah, the request for additional resources and growth of the incident or mitigation of the incident, that all comes through the command post. Provide tactical objectives. So the incident command, they establish a strategy, and then they also provide those tactical objectives of what needs to happen tactically. But what they don't do is they don't drill it all the way down to the specific implementation of the tactics. That's given to the group level leaders or the unit level leaders that are actually engaged in implementing those tactics. So review, evaluate, and revise as needed the incident action plan. So incident action plans are something that it could be something as simple as I just showed up on scene and I come up with a hasty plan of how I'm going to mitigate this incident. Believe it or not, I just made an incident action plan. Now, if it's going to be a larger scale incident or a planned incident, it becomes formalized, and they actually have resources like NIMS forms, National Incident Management System forms, that you can use to draw out your incident action plan. One of the things we do oftentimes if we have a scheduled event, including even our Grand Rounds training events, we develop an incident action plan for it. And what we found is that it allows us to have a better idea of the resources we need, the equipment needs, the length of time that different things are going to take to happen, how people are going to rotate. If we can put all that in an incident action plan, we can make things go much more efficiently. So about a year and a half ago, we started using those even for our educational offerings. And what we found is that we saved a lot of money. We got done on time, and we were able to make our educational offerings much more efficient, more professional. So the good thing is it's an educational opportunity for us to be able to start using those plans. Some of the managers have started utilizing those plans. I know Ricky Savage does a really good job with drawn up incident action plans for different events that he might manage. Provide for the continuity, transfer, and termination of command. So the incident command always has to have somebody in charge. So very often incidents, if they're longer scale or larger scale incidents, there's transfers of command. And usually that's formalized. Sometimes it's actually in writing if it's a really large incident. But oftentimes it's just stated over the radio for record that command's been transferred to this individual. And then termination of command, that actually needs to be a formal termination of command. And these are just things that are best practices that are recommended. As we become more integrated into the public safety community, these are just practices that we need to start learning. Okay, so radio reports. So some of the things that you can do in a radio report, and this is just kind of giving our staff an idea of what they're listening to when they're out there on the radio and they hear fire departments arriving on scene and they're doing these kind of formalized radio reports. I want our staff to really kind of start to listen to those, start to understand how they're being done. I would even encourage them to try to formalize some of their radio traffic when they're first on scene, to actually it's okay to establish command and to start giving some initial direction. A lot of this is safety related stuff. You know, there's no reason to keep units coming emergency from across town if you're the first on scene and you identify that you don't need those units to respond lights and sirens to your call. So you can get on, as a command function, you can slow them down, or you can get on the radio and ask for, you can cancel PD, or you can ask for PD, or you can cancel the fire department or ask for the fire department. We do these kind of things all the time, and believe it or not, whether you realize it or not, you're actually functioning as the incident commander when you do those things. Designation of the unit arriving on scene, for example, you would be like Engine 2, Ladder 3, Medic 1, MD1, etc. We have our numbers are based on what service area you're from. So it could be like 601 or 701, arrived on scene at the address of, you give your address and you establish command, you are command, and you basically say that over the radio. And you can give a brief description of the incident situation. So any obvious safety concerns, for example, you could say what type of structure you were arriving on. If there was some safety issues, it's okay for us to actually go ahead and communicate that. But these things also, you're gonna hear them communicated over the radio. The things that you can kind of expect to listen for when you hear these fire department's units when they arrive on scene, and they're important things for us to listen to so that we don't put ourselves in danger, that we're paying attention to those command instructions that are coming over the radio. And you also want to declare your strategy, like what type of incident is this? Is this a cardiac arrest? So that basically says your strategy. We're on the scene of this address, we are command, and we are going to be working a cardiac arrest. That tells people a lot. That tells people the kind of resources we need. That tells people that what we're doing and we're actually going to work. So whoever arrives next, like your next in fire department unit, that person's gonna go ahead and assume that command function because you're busy. So a brief description of the action that you are taking. So what are you doing? You're initiating rescue efforts, or like in the sense of the cardiac arrest, you're initiating CPR. You're establishing an ambulance transfer point or an ambulance exchange point. You see those terms being used, AXP, AEP. Those are terms that I think that it's good to start learning these things. CCP is a casualty collection point. These terms are used in the incident command plans that are put together at the county level. Like we had a recent incident command planning session that was put together by some of the Springfield fire people for some protests that we had in Springfield, and they identified multiple, they're using the term AEP, and that stands for Ambulance Exchange Point. That's where your ambulances would go pick people up. So it's good for us to start learning these national standard terms. Assignment to responding companies or needed support activities to responding companies. So it's like, what do you need to do? What equipment do you need to bring? These are things that you can ask for to make your incident mitigate more efficiently. Request or release resources as required. If it's determined that no emergency exists, incoming companies can be slowed or they can be canceled. So those are some other things that can be done, and they actually make the incident safer. If it's not necessary for us to take these risks, we can go ahead through good incident command communication, we can mitigate that risk. So this is an example, just an example of a radio report that, say, a fire department engine company might do for an EMS call. So Engine 8 is on the scene of 3800 South G Street. Engine 8 is G Street Command. We have a multi-vehicle injury accident with 4 people. Engine 8 is initiating patient care and is requesting 2 BLS transport units. Additionally, PD will be required for traffic control. So if you read through that, you can kind of see that we met most of the objectives, if not all the objectives that were identified in the previous page. So that's just a basic incident commander, first in on scene radio report. And if this was something that was a larger scale incident, that communication is going to start to grow. So really all this is about is good communication. It's to solve the problems that we have with not communicating. If we don't communicate, then everybody is assuming that things are being done, or they're unclear, or they're putting themselves in dangers that aren't necessary. So the incident command system, it's all about safety and doing the best for the people we serve. So here's a single company incident where a medic unit happens to be the first on scene. Medic 1, this could be 601. 601 is on the scene of 1101 Pacific Avenue. We have a dumpster fire with no exposures. We'll need the fire department because you're a medic unit. You can't put that dumpster fire out. But you also could identify that there's any hazards, and you could communicate some things. You could also further communicate things like where the nearest hydrant is. If there's a building nearby, you know, as you kind of assess the scene a little more, and you can communicate these things to the incoming units so they can better be prepared. Also, they may decide that they need additional resources. If that dumpster is next to an apartment complex and the dumpster fire is starting to catch the apartment complex on fire, that's a really important thing that they would need to know, because then they would up their response and they would bring a lot more units to that scene. So this is an example of a fire department that shows up at a structure fire. An engine company. Engine company is the pumper. So an Engine 1 is on the scene of 1420 South 9th Street. Engine 1 is command. We have a 50 by 75 2-story wood frame residential structure with 25% involvement on the second floor. Engine 1 is preparing for an interior attack with 1 3/4 pre-connect from side 1. Have the second arriving engine lay in to Engine 1. They'd be laying in a water supply. There's a hydrant at 9th and Sheridan. First arriving ladder company assess and perform ventilation. Third company initiate the primary search. Engine 1 is passing command to the next arriving company. So if you're a medic unit and you're being told to respond to that fire, so you know that Engine 1's not command anymore. They're working, they're pulling hose and putting fire out. And the next in company is who that commander is. Then you also want to continue to listen to that radio traffic to see if there's any safety hazards or any instructions to you. If there's any injuries and they're bringing the patients out, and they're going to communicate where they're bringing those patients out to. So you have an important role in this incident command system. We're part of the system. So command organization. The command organization must develop at a pace which stays ahead of the tactical deployment of personnel and resources. In order for the incident commander to manage the incident, they must first be able to direct control and track the position and function of all operating units. Build a command organization is the best support mechanism that the incident commander can utilize to achieve an effective balance between managing personnel and incident needs. Simply put, this means large scale and complex incidents, they get a large command structure. Small scale and minor incidents, they get a small command structure. So as the incident grows, you need to stay ahead of it. This is something that In our world, we don't have to deal with a lot. A lot of times these incident command structures are built by law enforcement or they're built by the fire department. But if it's a large-scale medical incident, it's probably going to be us. And we just have to be aware that the needs of the incident we have to stay on top of, because one of the worst things that could happen is you get outside of your span of control. Then you're not able to effectively manage your incident. So you have to keep that span of control by growing the incident. We're going to talk about that. So the incident commander should, though, have more people working than commanding. So that's another danger of trying to grow the incident too fast, though. And then you have all these people running around with vests and filling different roles and stuff, but you don't have anyone actually working at the incident. So you have to always have enough people working at the incident and grow the incident as you need more help, not growing a great big large incident command structure when it's not needed. So there's both sides of that, if that makes sense. Okay, so command structure. So division and group, the basic operational approach. The use of division and groups in the command organization provides a standard system to divide the incident scene into smaller subordinate management unit areas. So here's a pictorial example of what we're looking at here. We've got, so like say a roof division. And the reason they're using the word division with that group of people that are working up there is because it's geographic. So just remember that divisions are geographic and groups are functional. So you have your commander, and then you've got your fire attack, and it says there Captain Engine 2 down there. But that would be that would actually be a function. So fire attack would be the fire attack group because it's functional. Whereas the roof division, they're calling it a geographic area. So if you see those terms, division and groups, they basically are the same organizational level, but they're just referring to one thing is a geographic reference and the other is a actual task or function reference. So expanding the organization. So in general, branches can be established for the following reasons. If we get outside of our span of control, we need to start building branches where we have groups and divisions inside of those branches. They can also be designed for functional reasons. They can also be designed for multi-jurisdictional purposes. So when the number of divisions and groups exceeds the recommended span of control for the operations section chief, the incident commander or operations section chief shall designate a multi-branch structure to allocate the division and groups within the branches. So just to kind of backtrack a little bit, does everybody know what the ideal span of control size is? You there, do you know?
5?
Yeah. So that's for fast-paced incidents, they recommend no more than 5 people under your leadership. So it can go, the range is 4 to 7, but really 5 is kind of the recommendation. And I would say in our public safety environment, the type of incidents we go on, 5 is a pretty safe number because most of our incidents are pretty fast-paced and there's usually a high safety risk. Okay. So here's a little diagram that gives you an idea. So there you have a command, and you have below that incident commander, whose their main goal is to think about the strategies and the tactical objectives, and then you have their operations section chief. That's the person that's basically giving the actual the specific directions to the leaders in the structure. So you have divisions and groups that are built under that operations section. As you see there, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we're already outside of our span of control. So it needs to grow more. So we can break it down, and we have branch 1 and branch 2 so that we can get that span of control back to where it needs to be. So we have under branch 1, we got division 1, 2, and 3, invent group. In branch 2, division 4, 5, overhaul group, and evaluation group. So remember what I told you, the divisions, they're identified as a geographic reference. So like if you have a division 1, it's probably related to the people that are on side 1 of a building or the people that are on the first floor of the building. So that's usually how those are referenced. So we also can break out the branches by those functional references like we talked about. So we can have a medical branch, we can have a fire branch, and we can have a hazmat branch. And there's some breakdowns of some of the groups and divisions that you could have underneath of those particular branches. So that's another way that you can develop your incident. So as the incident continues to grow, you can break it down into units there. So here we have a fire branch, medical, law enforcement branch. Inside of law enforcement, we got traffic control, evacuation group. We may have a security group. And then that kind of diagram sort of breaks down like the actual resources that are inside of each group and division. So command, that term command, it refers to your incident commander. Officer, that's a title that refers to a member of the command staff, like your information officer, your safety officer, your liaison officer. I always remember, so the command staff, and then you have your general staff, and I always remember the general staff by the term FLOPS. So you got finance, logistics, operations, and planning. So those are the people that fall under your general staff, and then your command staff those are really your people that are in direct line assistance of your incident commander, and that's your information, safety, and liaison. And information is also often referred to as your public information officer, your PIO. A lot of people might be more familiar with that term. So director, that's a title that refers to the positions of a branch director. So branches, the leader of a branch is called a director, which is in the operations section or logistics section between the divisions and groups and the operations section chief. So a supervisor, so that's a leader of a division or group. Okay, so if you're a head of a division or group, you're referred to as a supervisor. These are nationally standardized terms. So the reason we're kind of laying these out for you, because if you ever work within a large scale incident, you'll see all these people titled with these types of terms. So if someone came up to you and said, Brandon, you're going to be the Division I supervisor. You've got a pretty good idea of where you fit inside the incident command system. So that's why it's important to kind of have a little bit of an idea of what these terms mean. Unit leader, so the title refers to a position with a supervisor and a management responsibility of either a group of resources or a unit, such as ground support, medical, supply, etc. Manager, that's the title that refers to the lowest level of supervision within the logistics section. So it'd be like your equipment managers, your base managers, your camp managers, staging area manager. So they're very important roles very often, but it's usually somebody that falls within that, logistics section. So single resource, an engine company or a ladder company with a company officer and a crew. So that's your single resource. So expanding the organization. So you got your incident commander, and remember I talked about it, you got your command staff, which is information, safety, and liaison. And then you've got your general staff, which is your finance, logistics, operations, planning. Remember I said FLOPS, that's how I remember it. Okay, so here's a diagram of what's getting to be a pretty large-scale incident command system for a typical incident. You've got your incident commander, and that incident commander, their direct reports to them is their command staff, their information officer, their safety officer, liaison officer. So can one person in a smaller incident wear multiple hats?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So think of it like this. If you're a medic unit and you show up at a 2-car MVA and you're the only person there and you establish command, believe it or not, you're everything in this picture. Okay, so as the incident grows, we start filling these roles when there's a need. So incident commander, you got your information safety liaison, and then you got your FLOPS, your finance, logistics, operations, planning. Underneath of those, you have all the different roles that fit within that system. Operations section is usually your kind of your meat of your incident, because that's the people that are actually actively engaged in the tactics that mitigate the incident. So unified command. So this is how most larger incidents are managed, under this concept of unified command. And really what unified command is all about is so that when we have multiple jurisdictions that all are trying to achieve the same objective, they're participating in the same incident, in order for us to communicate with each other, we have to have somebody that's in that command post. So if it's an active shooter event, for example, at one of the schools, law enforcement's probably going to be the overall incident commander, have the overall authority at that incident, but it's going to be a unified command. And you're going to have fire department in that command post. You're going to have medical in that command post, EMS. And then you're going to have school representatives in that command post. And you may have others that belong in that command post. But that's the concept of unified command. And then that's your command, and then below that you've got your command staff and you've got your flops. There's also this concept of unified command where it's over a large-scale area and you have different agencies. Like you could have 3 different counties operating at a large-scale incident, and you've got agency A, B, and C, and they all have different jurisdictional objectives, but they're all part of the unified command. They work together. Believe it or not, a lot of people envision this and they think, well, it probably just isn't very cooperative. Believe it or not, by having this type of unified command concept, it usually solves all the problems because you have the leaders that are sitting in that command post, and they're able to meet the objectives of their organization, and they're also able to communicate with their organization. Usually where you run into problems in large-scale incidents is if you have one agency that's trying to stand up and run the command system with all these different other agencies that are responding, and they're not able to talk to the command post. So radio networks for large incidents will normally be organized as follows. We're not going to get into that. And one last thing to talk about with the unified command concept, we went through a lot of multi-agency drills to try to really hone down on the rescue task force concept. And one of the things we found is for those type of ASHER incidents, active shooter, hostile event incidents, for us to really be successful at mitigating those types of incidents, we have to have EMS, has to be in that command post. So that's why I'm here teaching you this incident command terminology and these systems. And I know everybody takes their basic NIMS courses and they probably kind of made it go away when they did it online. So this is just to reinforce things that maybe we've already learned and sort of get us to sort of step our game up so we're aware that we are actually part of these systems. When we tried to do the MSU RTF incident, and then also the one we practiced at Cox South, we immediately identified, and it usually took us 2 or 3 reps, that the incident could not be mitigated efficiently without all players being in the command post. Almost inevitably, it would start off and you would have one agency that would try to run the incident and it wouldn't work. So that's all I got for you. Does anybody in the group have any questions or anything?